What's happening, guys? Welcome back to the channel. Welcome back to another video. We're back in the garage with the 135. We're working on a plethora of things today, but most importantly, we are installing the Doc Race intake manifold along with port injection. Big shout out to Christian over at Vehicle Virals for sending this out. If you guys don't know, they actually sell parts as well. You might be familiar with his YouTube channel. He does a lot of BMW content, but he also has a web store. So I'm gonna have it linked down below where you guys can pick up products like this. He's got a lot of different stuff available. But let me show you guys what we got, and let's talk a little bit about the process that we're gonna go through today. Excuse my mess. I've been working on a million things at once here, just trying to make things happen as best as I possibly can. Here is the beautiful Doc Race intake manifold from the Vehicle Viral store. This thing looks super nice. I ended up just going with a silver finish, but you can get it in like a raw finish, a black finish. I have a couple of different colors. I decided to keep it as simple as possible. I didn't want to go too crazy. Kind of make it look like it's OEM, but just a little bit nicer. I really like the black too. I thought the black was really nice. So everything that comes in the kit, you have your rail for the injectors, and then I ended up going with the 750cc Bosch injectors right here. It comes with some hardware lines, and then of course the manifold itself, which is freaking nice, dude. This thing is super sick. Can't wait to get it in there. It's gonna look really good in our engine bay. Obviously we are doing port injection too, so to control the port injection, I have reflex, motive reflex coming as well. It's not here yet, so we won't have everything hooked up today, but we can at least get some things into the car because I have a lot of other stuff that I'm working on at the same time. As you can see, I have no coolant in the car right now. I drained all that out. Test fitting a bigger intercooler, which is just a little bit nicer. I was running this thing and it's just kind of clapped out and old, and probably not very efficient. So the 1M front bumper can eat a lot bigger intercooler. So I ended up upgrading to a nice big CSF front mount intercooler, which I think looks really good. And then I ended up pulling out a lot of the stuff already. The charge pipe, the throttle body, which is all pretty self-explanatory. And of course, I'm just like labeling stuff as I go along here so I don't forget what goes where. Did pull off this vacuum line for the brake booster, which I think I'm actually gonna replumb. And then obviously over here, I have my coolant expansion tank from Turner Motorsports. I'm trying to see what's gonna fit, what's not gonna fit. I drained the coolant because I'm gonna be running new coolant lines to our new auxiliary 1M radiator over here. So I need to rerun coolant lines. I'm actually still waiting on one of the coolant lines from BMW. And then furthermore, obviously we're gonna be running new lines to this expansion tank. So the big thing today that I wanna do is I kind of want to get things installed and mocked up and just kind of see what's going to fit where, because the power steering, I'm hoping that I can mount it right here. I have a bracket that's coming from BMW that allows me to mount it right onto that right there. I think that will be the cleanest setup, but I just don't know if it's all going to fit once I get my manifold in here, because it is quite large and it does take up a good amount of space. And then I also have a catch can coming from Burger Motorsports. It's probably going to sit somewhere back here. I'm not quite sure yet. Again, a lot of this stuff is just like, it's hard to tell without having everything in. So I just kind of want to just knock off some of the stuff off the list and start getting on the project. Some things are going to be changing. Some of the lines are going to be changing. And yeah, it's just going to be a work in progress. Honestly, I don't know how long this is going to take, but I'm just going to get as much done as I can. And I might even split it up into different videos. Whatever we got to do to get the job done. Another thing to note is that the intake manifold sits really close to the plastic oil filter cap. So I ended up ordering a billet oil filter cap, which I think is just going to look a lot nicer, and it allows us to take it off from the nut that's on top of it like that. So obviously you need to get the car to this point, pull a lot of stuff off. I kind of went a little bit further because I'm changing so much on the front end with intercooler and piping. And when it comes to the actual boost pipes and charge pipes and fittings and all of that stuff, it's going to change depending on what your setup is. So mine is 3 1/4 coming out of the intercooler, and then over there it's 2 1/2 into the boost pipe, and then out of here it's going to be 3 1/4 into 3 into the charge pipe that comes from Doc Race. I did order a couple of different silicone couplers, but I think that this one's just going to be a really hard 90-degree angle in order to make this work. It's super tight in here with that. This one shouldn't be too difficult. I ended up getting a 6-inch long coupler just straight right into the boost pipe, so I can run that one like that. And yeah, so a lot of this is just going to depend on where things sit and how that charge pipe lines up. It is a tight fit though, man. I started mocking things up and I'm like, man, this is going to be a super tight fit, but we will make it work. We will make it work. In addition to that, I kind of went crazy, cleaned up my throttle body. Now I didn't want to like polish it. However, it did turn out really freaking good, man. This thing was in rough shape and I took about 4 hours on this thing and just kind of went through it. I didn't get all of it. Like you can still see it's kind of grimy over there, but the reason reason I did that is I was looking at photos of the Doc Race manifold and how people have it set up in the car, and this is really all you see. So I didn't want to spend, you know, another 4 hours just trying to get the whole thing polished when it didn't really matter because you're not going to see the other side of it. Might as well just polish up and make look good, you know, the parts that you are going to see. But I think it turned out really nice. I just bought a bunch of different sandpapers. I started with 400, went to 600, went to 800, went to 1000, went to 1500, and then just used a little bit of compound and polishing, and it, dude, it turned out freaking beautiful. I didn't want to install all this stuff and then just have like a really booty looking throttle body. So that would just look terrible. So it'd be nice. It'll match this a little bit, you know, which this thing's gotten scratched up over the months here, and I need to kind of polish that thing out too. But did a little bit over here, just kind of cleaning stuff up, you know. It just kind of looks kind of janky in here, and there's kind of a lot of stuff I want to change to make it look nice. At the end of this build, man, I want this thing to look really freaking good. So I'm taking my time and make sure we do things right. Pull the fan out. I am looking into alternatives for a fan. I want to just run a nicer fan. Old coolant reservoir over here. This thing is just, you know, when we first installed the engine in the car, we really just kind of like put things together to make it work, and this is obviously what we ended up with, just like some goofy looking stuff. So I ended up taking this one out because just is not clean, and I want everything to be clean. I want all the plumbing to be replumbed and make sure that it looks good and that it's effective. Taking the time to do it right, you know? Also, there is a really good DIY by my friend Jake Spence. I'm sure you guys have heard of him. He's a BMW YouTuber as well, and he did a really good write-up on the Doc Race intake manifold. Mine is a little bit different now that the injectors are on top of the intake manifold rather than underneath. Nonetheless, if you guys are looking on how to install this, make sure you check out Jake Spence's write-up. It's very detailed. He's got a list of everything else that you need to order. You do need to order some more things in addition to just like the manifold and the kit and the charge pipe and all that. This is a pretty detailed install. Like, it's not as simple as just slapping it on. There is quite a little bit of work to it, but you guys will see all of that throughout the video. First thing is first, we're going to work on the intake manifold portion of this install. So these are cast, obviously, from Doc Race, and they do come with some imperfections when it comes to the manifold themselves. Inside, there's little berms and stuff just from fabrication and manufacturing. So we're gonna go ahead and just clean up any of the little nibs or berms of metal. Just use a little bit of sandpaper or something like that so we can clean all that stuff out so it's just nice and clean, and then we'll throw some compressed air through it to make sure there's just no loose metal. Obviously, you don't want that going into your engine. And then we will start working on, I guess, removing the rest of the intake manifold here. Obviously, you're gonna have a bunch of plugs and stuff that you need to unplug. These are all going to have to get extended because now your throttle body is sitting way up here. So we're going to be doing a little bit of wire work, a little bit of rerunning connections. I also have my coolant level sensor plug right here, so I'm going to have to reroute that a little bit. There's just a lot of little things that are going to have to change with this setup, but in the end, I'm going to make sure that it's nice and it looks really good. So just to show you guys, there's a lot of like little garbage in there, and I'm gonna go in there and remove all of that. You sort of have to, you know? Like, you don't want that to just come loose and go right into your engine, so. All right, so we got her all cleaned up. That's gonna take a little bit of time. I ended up using this like long ruler to get in there, and it's flexible, so it allowed me to hit the walls and everything. And then I just cleaned up the little areas with that. But this is like just big enough, just barely big enough for my arm and hand. But we got it nice and cleaned up. There's a lot of junk that came out, man. So just make sure you guys clean this as thoroughly as possible. All right, so we got that cleaned up. Looks good. I'm comfortable with that. I don't think any of that is gonna go into my engine now. All right, so I am just getting to work. This is pretty much ready to go in. I'm not gonna put the fuel rail or the injectors or any of that stuff in until this is in the car. That way we'll be able to get in the intake manifold bolts and the gasket and all that stuff. So what I'm doing is I want to do a bit of a wire tuck here. So I'm actually gonna be moving some things around. There's a Vano solenoid cable right here. These two I'm gonna be moving probably down here. So I'm gonna be extending these wires, running them along here and then back here. I already moved some of the cables that were up here and moved them down here. I'm trying to put everything under the intake manifold so you can't see it. Not like a crazy wire tuck job, but something that will land me with just a cleaner setup overall. Basically just wiring up, extending all of the cables and wires right now. I'm working on the throttle body cable. These little connectors are pretty cool. You basically just heat them up and then it melts the solder in the middle and connects the two wires. Makes it super easy to extend everything. So I got extra loom as well, so I can cover these up. It'll look all nice and clean, but it takes a good amount of time, man. I mean, this one probably took me to cut all the wires and get everything extended, I don't know, 20 minutes or something like that. Alright, it's update time. I want to show you guys what I've done so far. So you saw in the last clip, a lot of the wires were running on top through here. So what we've done is kind of like a little wire tuck situation. I basically rewired everything to run underneath so you don't see anything above. It's gonna be a lot cleaner in the end. I did the coolant temp sensor, I did the Vanos over here. Thinking I'm gonna just run it along this line right here. Here are the two looms under here. Rewired and extended all of these, T-map, throttle body. This is for the intake manifold sensor. Don't need to extend that because it literally just stays in the same place, so we can plug it in right there. Here's the new gasket that goes onto the engine, so I'll throw this onto the engine and then we'll go ahead and we're ready to mount in the intake manifold, which is dope. Basically, like, all of this nest under here is where we want to hide things. So you just don't see anything on top. Yeah, also extended this wire as well, so I just have a little more room. Basically extended everything that I needed to in order to make this as clean as possible. Gonna be doing the same back here with all that stuff once we get into catch can territory. That's gonna be my next little project, but I got the coolant sensor wire being ran. I'm probably gonna run this a little bit differently, like back here. Oh, and then also this goes to the throttle body as well. So that is everything. I'm going to throw in the intake manifold and then we can start sort of putting stuff back together. I don't have everything to finish the job today, but I do have most things to kind of give us an idea of what it's going to look like and what's going to go where. That is wild, man. This thing looks crazy in here. It looks so good. And I think we're going to be plenty fine with room. Well, I hope. Everything lines up really well. It's super, super tight fitment. You just got to work it around. You might be better off just taking off this top cowl, but I didn't have to because I had mine cut, so. Made it a lot easier. Just remember you have that sensor underneath here that you need to plug back in. And don't forget you do have that vacuum line also that's coming out of there. We're gonna have to tap into that as well. This is looking really good, man. Really, really good. Very, very happy with this so far. All right, so I think we can go ahead and do throttle body at this point. So I got a new gasket as well from BMW. Throw that in and then mount that up. And that will sort of give me a good idea as to, you know, where I can start putting things. One thing I do want to show you, when I said I was going to the billet cap, this is why. It's very, very close fitment in here. So that is one thing to keep in mind. All right. It's looking pretty good, man. Make sure you don't over tighten these guys. Obviously be very careful, you guys, when you have all this open, so you're not dropping stuff into there, but you guys know that. I don't need to tell you that. Let's start running some plugs and wires. Oh my God, it's a little short. Definitely want more slack out of this, so I'm gonna rerun this. Get things mocked up. Good news and bad news. Good news, I can keep this expansion tank. This is totally gonna work right here. Bad news, power steering reservoir is definitely not gonna fit right here. It's just too small. The most realistic spot is like right here, which is probably what's gonna end up happening. I'll do some sort of custom mount over there. The other bad news is this is no bueno. This pipe, charge pipe, is super long. In fact, it's actually hitting the intercooler. It's probably meant for the stock intercooler, which I'm gonna assume sits lower. I honestly don't know. I mean, this one lines up perfectly. Like I can just get a coupler and run it right into the boost pipe and I'll be good. But this one is, yeah, that's not gonna work. So I think what has to happen is I need to chop that. I need to chop like 2 inches off of the charge pipe in order to make that work. So it's just a work in progress, man. You gotta figure stuff out as you go along here. But this all looks really good. I mean, that came together quite nicely. I mean, it's okay. I'm not trying to get everything locked in today because I still have to run my coolant lines for this auxiliary radiator and I'm waiting on a hose. So I don't want to like button everything down when I just have to, I'm going to have to move everything again, so it doesn't really matter. So I think what's next for me is 1, figure out how much of this I need to chop off. 2, figure out where I'm going to relocate this and how I'm going to do it. More than likely, I think I'm going to use something probably off of here, make some sort of mount under here to just mount it right here. That would be like perfect. It looks crazy though, man. I think it's sick. All right, guys, we are back. Day 2 in the garage, working on this beauty of an intake manifold. Hoping to get a couple of things accomplished today. 1, I did cut the charge pipe, so we had to lose about 2 inches, and then we also went ahead and bead rolled it. I'm gonna take off some of this paint from the bead roll, but file this down so it's nice and clean. I'm still waiting on my couplers and everything, so I can't quite go crazy yet. If you guys remember yesterday, I also mentioned how the power steering reservoir basically was not gonna work right over here. It's gonna hit the charge pipe. So what we're gonna end up doing is mounting it right there. That's kind of what I'm thinking. And so what I did was I had an old power steering reservoir mount, but it had another bracket coming off the side of it. So I ended up just cutting off the other bracket, sort of see where it was right there. And then I just sprayed it with some black engine enamel paint, which should be decent, kind of letting that dry for a little bit longer. So that should be good. We may have to extend these a little bit. This, if you don't remember, goes to the throttle body right here, but I'm an idiot and I made it too short, and we definitely don't want it to be that tight. So we're gonna take this off, and then I got some more tubing for us, and we're gonna reroute it. Well, not reroute it, just rerun it with a lot more slack. I'm still waiting on one of the other coolant hoses for the auxiliary radiator setup, so we can't get into that yet. But what we can do is get into the port injection stuff, get all of that set up, and then we're gonna peel off this cowl back here, and I'm gonna also run my catch can, which just came. So we can set that up. All this weird goofy junk is gonna come off. So I've just got to wait until my right angle coupler gets in, and I think that's gonna be, it's gonna be right on the money, man. Right, update time. Trying to keep this as clean as possible, but man, when it comes to power steering fluid, there's really not much you can do to to keep it clean. This is gonna work. Looks like it's gonna work, man. Got it remounted over here. It's a good little spot for it. Might have to bend this bracket out just a little bit, but I I think it's gonna work out. And it's nice because there's not really much over here and you can still access all the lines and everything. Kind of want to do all the injectors, the port injection and everything last, so I don't have to dig all the way back in there again. I'm gonna pull off the cowl and do the catch can setup. Catch can, I believe, is, I'm gonna put it right here. So we got a little spot for it, but yeah, making progress. Oh, got the catch can here. In goes to the valve cover, out is into the intake. It's labeled too, which is kind of nice. In, back of the valve cover, out, intake. I think I want to mount it like right there, you know, like back in the corner. I think that'd be like pretty clean. Here's the catch can setup. I could only get one of the mounting bolts into the actual piece itself, just because of the angle that it has to sit at. But these lines don't like to bend too much. These are basically like 1-inch heater hose. They don't like to bend too much, so I kind of had to get crafty with like the way that I ran it. Basically, the one that goes into the intake is right here. It's up top, and there's not enough room to run two of them up top, so I had to run the one that was underneath that goes into the valve cover through there, and then it comes up right there. You don't want to long hose for that for obvious reasons, and then the longer one obviously that goes into the intake travels through and then behind and over there. So it's pretty good. I mean, a lot of this stuff I think it's going to change when I go single. I could probably come up with better ways to run it, you know. And then anytime I want to check it, this bottom just unscrews. You can pop it right off and I'll be able to reach it without having to take anything off because the cowl is cut too. So all right, it is time to tackle the new coolant setup with the auxiliary radiator from the 1M, which is over here. I finally got the last line that I needed for this. So here is the first line. This is actually going to be replacing the line that goes across right here and goes into the radiator right there. So it actually lays in just like that. You're gonna have to take off the old one. And then this line over here will now connect directly onto our auxiliary radiator. So rather than feeding into the coolant reservoir tank, it's going to go directly into the auxiliary radiator. And then what happens is we use this guy right here to replace the line that goes from the back of the car to right up front, right through there. So now it's going to connect one side to the auxiliary radiator, and then the other side is going to go into our coolant reservoir. So basically we're just replacing two lines that has an extra outlet for the auxiliary 1M radiator to be functional. So I was waiting on these to get these done first before we finished up everything else, because in order to put stuff back in, we got to get the coolant situation figured out. And then we're going to wrap up the port injection stuff today. I still have to do the fuel line out of the high pressure fuel pump, which honestly probably would have been a lot easier before I put the manifold in, but it is what it is. We can still access it. It's right down there. So we can slap on our rail, throw in our injectors, and yeah, we should be good. We won't be able to start it in this video because I got other stuff that we're doing on top of that, but at the very least we can wrap up everything and make it actually look like a car again. Man, that was a bitch to get off. It's not as easy as I thought it would be. So the way this goes in, it should be like this orientation. It's always the things where you're like, oh, this is only gonna take 15 minutes. And then they just take forever. Well, not forever, but those lines are a pain in the ass to get out. All right, so I have everything ran. Here's the new line over here, and it runs across. It's the black line underneath here. It's gonna be real fun getting our fan back in. That'll be just a blast. But it feeds in over on this side, and then this line is the last one that I ran that goes all the way to the firewall. And these are obviously all coolant lines. And then they both connect right under here to our auxiliary radiator. So it is now going to be fully functional with our upgraded radiator over here, and then also our new OEM 1M aux radiator. So the last piece that we will need to put on for the coolant reservoir and the rest of this coolant setup is the line that comes out of here that I have capped off, and then that's going to go across into our reservoir, which will sit right there. Other than that though, coolant stuff is good. We're good to go with that, and now we can start jumping into some fuel stuff. We need to get down underneath. This is definitely something that I should have done before I put the intake manifold on. I just wasn't thinking, but your high pressure fuel pump is back here, and basically you're going to use a little T-fitting like this. And so basically this T-fitting is going to go in between the high pressure fuel pump pump and that fuel line that runs up to the main injectors up here. But now we are obviously adding another little line to it, which is gonna go to the back of the manifold and into our new port injection rail. So yeah, this should be interesting. I'm gonna try and do this without having to take this off. I think I can get away with it. The only thing that's gonna be difficult is feeding it through the back. Everything is just such a tight fit in this car, man. Like motor and everything and all the additional stuff that you add. It can be done, obviously, but it's just a tight fit. All right, so to show you guys the access line for the little T fitting that we're gonna use, it's gonna come in and out of this. So we need to undo this guy back here, and then the line is gonna feed up through the back of the manifold and then over the top into the rail. So in order to get this line off, you're gonna need a 13 and a 16, and then you just twist and it should pop out. The car hasn't been on for quite a while. It's just been up on jack stands, so there's probably not much fuel pressure in the line, but there probably will be a little bit of fuel that comes out, so just be wary of that. After an intense battle with a bunch of wires and cables, I got the fuel line sorted. Runs on the T section right there. And as you can see, feeds right up through here, which will go into our port rail, feed our new injectors. All right, so I haven't found a ton of resources on this section of the install online. Being that this is the V2, things are a little bit different. But you have these little mounting points. This is the orientation of the rail. An easy way to tell how this is going to fit if you're just putting this on for the first time is look at where the injector holes are and then look at where the mounting points are for the actual manifold to the rail. So you'll see that you have these little spacers on here that allow you to mount it to the manifold like that. So it'll kind of mount just like that, and there's hardware. And what we need to do is a couple of things. On the back side where the fuel line will be leading into that guy, we're going to add on this piece, throw it in this side, and then the fuel line will mount up to the other side of that, right? And then the front here, we will cap that off. And then on the inside, this is the part that was a little bit confusing for me, but you also have, obviously, your injectors. Anytime you guys are using anything with rubber O-rings like this, make sure you're using silicone in between it. So we're gonna lube all of these little guys up very good. And these spacers are gonna go into the rail itself. And then the injector will come out of the spacer and into the manifold. So that's the orientation of it. And then when we have reflex, we can plug directly into the injectors, and that will control that whole system separately, aside from our normal injectors, our stock injectors. So originally I had the injectors on the rail and I was trying to put them all into the manifold at once. However, getting the injectors into the manifold is much more difficult than getting the injectors into the rail. So kind of made more sense to just put each individual injector into the manifold, the actual pressure that I can put on it individually, and then just go ahead and put the rail on top. That was a lot easier for me. I guess everyone kind of does it their own way. These plugs, they can't be oriented towards the fuel rail right here because they'll hit this. So you kind of just have to have them coming out right here, which I guess makes sense. And then we'll just have the reflex feeding down there. Everything fits. I changed these to just be straight because they mounted a lot better and aligned up better like that. We do still have to put in our AN fitting back here. Not a whole lot of room, but we'll hopefully make it work without having to take stuff off again. Should be all right though. I'm gonna put the little screws in here, lock this into place, and then we can go ahead and throw our fuel line on. All right, I think we are good. Everything lines up. Got the fuel fitting on. Injectors are in. So I don't have reflex here yet. I'm still waiting on reflex, but you know, that'll be a separate video because if we try to put that in this video, it's gonna be an hour long. But we are fitted, man. We are good to go. Injectors are clearly in. Hopefully we don't have any leaks. I think we should be okay. So now I'm gonna go ahead and just sort of put everything back together. We did it. We freaking did it, man. That was a ton of work. Oh man, there was just so much rerouting and replumbing, and yeah, still not completely finished. I have a couple of clamps that I'm missing for the couplers that go to the charge pipe. I'm waiting on one coupler for that side to go to the boost pipe, but for the most part we're done. I just gotta get the fan in after I do the couplers tomorrow. But yeah, man, it's turned out really good. So everything is rerouted. I've got the new expansion tank. I am running the fully functional 1M auxiliary radiator. Things get really hairy in here now that you have those 2 extra lines feeding out. It's just a lot to pack in. But yeah, all this turned out really good. Got the rail on. All the injectors are in. We just need to wait for reflex to come, and then we'll do that in a separate video. I've been working on and off like for 4 days on this thing, just when I can and when I have time and when the parts arrive, because I didn't have all the parts in the beginning. So it was just like as they started coming in, I would just add them onto the car. Got the catch can in a location where I'm happy with it. Power steering reservoir is now mounted in a location where I'm happy with it, and it's nice and even and straight up. Got our new expansion tank in. Got all of our new lines ran. We've got the fuel line going into our new port injection. Obviously the manifold, freaking beautiful manifold, now fits perfectly. Got the throttle body, you know, a little bit of polish action in. Charge pipe is now in with our blow-off valve. The last thing that is really gonna be the struggle is just getting the last coupler on right there. I'm gonna have to drop the intercooler again, which I already did like 12 times today, and then put on new clamps and then get our fan in, which is also gonna be super difficult because you now have this auxiliary line in here too. It was already tight before, but now you've got this in there and you've got like no room over here. All the wires are now tucked going underneath rather than above. Just cleans it up a little bit, makes it look a little bit better. They're all extended as well. And when I go single turbo, I'm actually gonna run all of these wires around the hot side of the car, but I'm gonna run them in like a heat sleeve so they obviously don't melt. But there's just more room over here that's like kind of untouched territory when it comes to being able to tuck stuff in. I think it turned out really good. I'm proud of it. Really proud of it. CSF front mount intercooler in right now, so it's a little bit larger. 1M front bumper OEM one can eat a little bit more of an intercooler, so that works out too. This was one for the books. I'm happy where things are for now. There are some things I'm gonna redo when I go to single turbo and I have more room in the hot side to adjust some things. Learned a ton doing this myself. Also learned a lot more about the engine and wiring and kind of where I want things to be in the future. So far, super happy with the setup, and I think that this is I think it's a really quality manifold. The install itself like isn't that bad. It's one of those things, now that I've done it once, I could do it a lot faster in the future, but I was adding so many other things as I was going along and changing so many other things that it just became such a larger project than it really was. Intake manifold isn't that big of a project in and of itself, but I had so many other little things going on and changing. Yeah, it turned out to be quite the project, but I'm really proud of it. I've got to give a huge shout out to everybody who was involved. Christian over at Vehicle Virals for actually selling this to me. If you guys need it, I'll have it linked down below. John over at Doc Race for assisting me in some questions. Hendel and Cayman over at CES for also helping me out with some questions. Jake Spence for the really good write-up on the install of this manifold, and anyone else and everyone else who has been involved in this project since the beginning. It's been a lot of fun. We've got a lot more work to do. A couple more things are coming in soon for this car, so we're gonna be jumping right back into it. Anyways, guys, thank you so much for watching the video. I appreciate you. I will see you in the next one. Peace.